Thank you everyone for having us. Again, my name is Antonio, and this is my longtime friend Angelico. It's really such an honor for us to be here talking to APPA. We're really new to finding out about the organization, but what we really wanted to do was find out what young Filipino-American physicians here in the United States want in a national organization. So we were actually able to do research on this through a national survey. So again, Antonio, that's my name. I am a neurologist. I'm currently in fellowship at the University of California, Los Angeles, and my research interests are on Filipino-American health disparities, specifically in acute stroke care, since stroke is such a huge problem in our community. I'm also very interested in the use of technology, specifically in teleneurology, for treating our patients.
Again, my name is Iko Razon. I'm an internist and pediatrician. As you'll notice, there are a lot of common logos up here between me and Antonio. We met each other at graduate school at the Harvard School of Public Health. I'm also a National Fellowship Scholar at University of Pennsylvania and the Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania, where I work mostly with young adults and adolescents with intellectual disabilities and chronic illnesses. And what Antonio and I really want to do with this project was to be able to offer our experiences working with communities, specifically Filipino communities, in our previous work, as well as some of our qualitative and quantitative research methods. And we're really excited to share kind of the stuff that we did for this project. Disclosures, we have none.
You don't own your Razon restaurant?
Those are the Razons of Guagua, we're the Razons of Lubao, so like right next door to each other. Cousins.
Great. So going back to the survey, really what motivates this research is finding out the reason why we do things. So I kind of like this model, the Simon Sinek model of looking at different initiatives, really centering on why. What is the purpose of this type of research? Why do we even want younger Filipino-American physicians involved in the national network? Then you can answer the questions about how are you going to go about doing that, and what exactly do we need to do to accomplish that goal. So this was our why, and we came up with these together after talking to a lot of the young Filipino-American physicians around the nation. Number one, strengthen the Filipino physician community and unify our voices. There are so many Filipino-American physicians who are between the ages of 20 and 40 who just don't know about each other, but we find a lot of unity and strength. Number two, inspire the future generations of Filipino physician trainees. So oftentimes, we're in the university setting, we have undergrads, we have people who are pre-med, and a lot of times they say, you know, it's too difficult to become a doctor in the United States, it's impossible, we don't have examples of Filipino physicians who train here. But we want to show them that that's not true, that there's actually a lot of Filipino-American physicians who train here in the United States and are currently practicing even as attendings. Number three, since we come from a more academic background, publishing our knowledge about the Filipino community, not only about the Filipino physician community, but about Filipino-Americans who've been here. We're the Asian group that's been in the United States the longest. Yet, I feel like our voice is not necessarily heard oftentimes amongst the large API, Asian Pacific Islander group. Number four, motivate young physician involvement in a national physician organization. That's why we were so happy to meet Dr. Romel Rivera and other members of APPA, because honestly, I didn't even know that APPA existed, and I'm in California. And I don't know if, Iko, if you had known about the organization as well. But we really want to see how we can work with APPA to create an agenda for future outreach and projects, especially for the younger Filipino physician group.
So the big question, taking a step back from all of that, the big question is basically, what do young Filipino-American physicians value in a national Filipino-American organization? And here's a little bit of a roadmap for how we approach kind of that question and breaking it down.
Yeah, sure. So there are three basic domains to the survey. The first is demographic questions. Who exactly are our respondents? What's their age? What's their gender identity? Where did they train for medical school fellowship, residency fellowship? Where are they practicing now? The second domain is personal questions. What is it actually like to be a Filipino-American physician here in the US? And then content questions specific to APPA. How would you like to be involved in APPA? What can we do to really engage with you? So we used a UCLA Qualtrics software, which was encrypted and got IRB approval to obtain this information for the survey. It was piloted all throughout the United States, including Hawaii. And actually, we piloted the survey first with 10 young Filipino-American physicians from all over the US, and also showed it to Dr. Rivera before we actually conducted it nationwide.
So I'm going to go over some of the demographic questions and findings, just to find out, who are we talking to and kind of who is in our sample study. So in the end, we had 44 respondents, and I'll tell you a little bit more about who was included, who was excluded in the findings that we're talking about today. Happy to answer more questions about this process later. But basically, self-reported Filipino-American physicians or medical students or pre-med students, they had to be 20 to 40 years old. We did exclude people who had incomplete answers, hence the study size was a little smaller. We also removed older and younger respondents who were outside the age group who did answer the survey. And we also excluded those first 10 people actually that we talked about as part of the pilot. We'll talk more a little bit about including them later on. So here's just a basic breakdown of some of the demographics, and I apologize if the back cannot see some of the slides, so I'll try to orient you to some of the graphics. So in terms of age, the minimum age is 24 up to 38 with a mean of 31.2. Actually, the true min and max were like 20 to 55, but obviously we had to exclude some of those in the 40s and 50s. And as you can see, there's a huge spike here at around between 30 and 32 years old. In terms of gender identity, basically half and half, 47% female, which is in the red, 53% male in the blue, and 0% responded other.
Can everyone see the colors okay? Or is it a little... we'll just point it out.
Yeah. So in terms of state of residence, the question is like currently where are you living and practicing? This large bar, number 5, is California, followed by number 33, which is New York State, and then number 14, which is Illinois, and then the rest are divided up between DC, Georgia, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Michigan, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Utah, West Virginia, and Wyoming. And then some of the medical specialties that represented. So not surprisingly, the top 2 were internal medicine and pediatrics, I think reflecting the general physician population. 6 medical students were also included, and the rest were a smattering of other internal medicine specialties, anesthesia, cardiology, neurology, family medicine, psychiatry, PM&R, EN, and OB-GYN. So here's a little more kind of granular detail. I'll try to orient you if you can't see the colors. So this like what is your current stage of medical training? So this blue section here, about 18% were medical students, 20% were residents, 31% were current fellows, and 27% were attendings. And there was another person who listed other, we're not really sure what they were. And then this is the setting of medical practice, which I thought was interesting as well. These are not mutually exclusive, so the results do add up greater than 100 because people could pick more than one. So this largest bar right here is the academic, they currently work in an academic setting. Number 2 down here is private practice at about 9%. Number 3 is a community practice at 13.6%. 2% worked in emergency department, no one worked in urgent care, and about 16% worked in a safety net setting.
So definitely a majority of our respondents came from academic settings, and that's their background.
A couple more other demographics really quickly. So this question asked, like, how many of your parents were born outside the United States? So the blue, which is the smallest part, had only 1 parent born outside of the United States at 9%. And this large red piece right here, 91%, both parents born outside the US. So in this sample, at least 1 parent, everyone is at least a second generation immigrant, if not an immigrant themselves. And then where was the respondent born? So it's about half and half. So half were basically born in the United States and the other half were born abroad somewhere. And then where do they have their primary education? This is also not mutually exclusive, so the answers are greater than 100. So basically, majority of respondents were in this red box here, which had a domestic primary education, so elementary school through high school. And the blue is lower one, 16 is abroad. And I think this is the part like we'll start to focus a little bit more on kind of segmenting our population a little bit more. And the question is, where did you go to medical school? So blue is 70.5, which is domestic. So they went to medical school here in the States. And the 30% is abroad, mostly the Philippines.
Quick question to everyone here. Can you raise your hand if you went to medical school outside of the United States? Okay. Can you raise your hand if you went to medical school in the United States? Okay, so one. So the survey respondents are kind of the inverse of the results here. So you're going to get a very different perspective maybe from what you've had in your background.
And to continue that same vein, so 100% said that they did residency here in the States, or were current residents, or were medical students here in the States. And the same thing for fellows, 100% were either did not do fellowship or did fellowship in the United States.
And also same question for everyone over here. Did everyone do residency and fellowship here in the US? How many did residency fellowship in the Philippines? One, okay. Oh yeah, two residents, okay. Good to know. All right, so we will dive into the actual results. So this is one of the questions that we had verbatim. What should be the mission of a national network of Filipino American physicians? So what should be the mission of APPA in other words? So what we did was we ranked the results from most important to least important kind of mission. Number one was create a mentorship program that encourages and empowers the youth to become physicians. That's that one over there. Number two was serve the health needs of the Filipino American community. And then the next three mission statements were all equal to each other, which was provide continuing medical education and career advancement opportunities, support and stimulate novel scientific research related to Filipino American community and other underserved communities, and create a social network of Filipino American physicians and physicians who train in the Philippines. The mission that scored the least was disparity, which was support and stimulate research on Filipino American health disparities. Then we thought it would be interesting to actually look at the data of respondents who trained in the US for medical school versus respondents who trained in the Philippines.
Yeah, sure. So on this side right here is the domestic trained medical, they went to a domestic medical school, and on this side is the abroad medical school. Same question, just disaggregated based on medical school location.
Yeah. So for those who trained in the US for medical school, serving community was number one. Doing research on Filipino communities was number two. Mentorship was number three. And what I thought was very interesting over here was that social networking and disparity research were more toward the bottom in terms of priorities for mission. For those who trained in the Philippines for medical school, number one was actually having a social network here in the US, mentorship, as well as continuing medical education. Again, with research on Filipinos and disparity research more on the bottom.
So the next question that we asked, this was actually an open-ended question, which we had a couple of these. And it's basically, what values should a national network of Filipino American physicians promote? So we do this for our preliminary analysis. We just took all the answers and did a word count and created this word cloud right here. And you can see that the most commonly cited words were leadership, service, underserved, and community. And we thought that we should kind of read some of the more some representative quotes that we, as we were reading the responses. For example, there should be a focus on community healthcare, education, especially in lifestyle changes due to the nature of Filipino food choices. Kapwa, bayanihan, and pakikisama. It's another good one. Service, education, community, and relationship building pipeline. Then another one I think was interesting is, I feel that the Philippine Physicians National Network should promote leadership in healthcare, service to the underserved population, and commitment to promoting interest in medicine among the Philan youth.
So, these weren't all of the responses. There were 44 responses, but we really tried to highlight the ones that encapsulated what all the other respondents were saying. Again, now looking on to, we looked at mission and we looked at values, now on to APPA specific priorities. So this was what the respondents said in terms of most important to least important. So the most important thing that the young Filipino physicians wanted was a medical education and career pipeline program to promote physician careers from all the way in high school, all the way up to being an attending. So that's, in the United States at least, high school, college, which was pre-med, medical school, residency, fellowship, then being an attending. The second was leadership training and coaching. That was very important. And then the third was academic training and advancement in academic medical careers. Then you could read the bottom. Fourth was addressing Filipino-American health disparities. Having a national forum or conference was more on the lower side. And having social functions and social gatherings for members was the lowest priority for the younger Filipino physicians.
So this is a simple disaggregation. And again, just to orient you, on your left is the domestic and on your right is abroad.
Yeah, so again, domestic medical school in the US. The respondents actually really focused on having a pipeline from high school on to being an attending doctor as their number one priority. Leadership, addressing disparities were 2 and 3. Academic training was 4. Then national conference and social networking were at the bottom. Then for respondents who trained in Filipino medical schools, academic training was most important, followed by educational pipeline and leadership, which were tied. Then addressing disparities, national conference, and social networking was last. So you can see the common theme was that really the priorities is how do I, as a younger Filipino physician, get to where I see older Filipino physicians, where they're at, because maybe I don't have that example really around me.
And so then we started asking what are the best ways to engage Filipino American community, so kind of the lay community. What we have here is ranked from most important to least, so just going from left to right. They cited emails and an online newsletter or social media was number 1 best way to engage the Filipino American community. National conference number 2, webinar was next, community service events, and then last was local community events. This is in...
Yeah, really quick, how many of you have heard of Dr. Willie Ong?
ONG?
ONG, yeah. Has anyone heard of Dr. Willie Ong? Okay, so I'm from Los Angeles, an historic Filipino town, and I work a lot with the Filipino veterans and Filipino community there. But so many of the older people, older Filipinos talk about Dr. Willie Ong's social media and Facebook Messenger as a way to actually outreach to the community. Our survey data actually supports that anecdotal evidence that a lot of older Filipino physicians look to online resources as a means of getting their health education. How many of you have Twitter accounts and actively use them? Okay. Or social media in general? Okay. So a few of us, so I think that if we really want to outreach to the Filipino American community, we have to be savvy on the platforms that they use as well.
So in a similar vein, this question is geared towards APPA members. Again, this is from the perspective of 20 to 30-year-old Filipino American physicians. But similarly, 1 monthly email newsletters, 2 regional meetings, 3 conferences, one-on-one meetings, webinar, and conference calls. And then we actually had a smattering of other suggestions as well, which included things like social media, Instagram, recruitment into community-based participant research, Google Hangouts. So those are all the free responses.
All right, and then now we dived into what is the personal experience of a Filipino-American physician who is young, aged 20 to 40. So this was a free response question. Again, we did a word cloud to see what are the words that most commonly came out in their responses. But the common themes after reading through all of them was that really an obstacle up to now, and it's interesting that we talk about the generation gap, is racism. That's what the younger respondents thought within the hospital and within the work environment. There's also the difficulty with family duties, especially while you're training, as you're a resident and a fellow, becoming an attending. This was a really big one too. Lack of examples from other Filipino physicians. I can talk personally, in my whole hospital, and I was in New York, I only had one Filipino other physician in the whole hospital, and I latched onto her because she was my example of who I wanted to be in the future. She was an academic geriatrician. And then immigration issues, this one, for those who trained in the Philippines and then moved into the US, there was a lot of writing about how difficult it was to navigate the visa system and getting kind of the right visa to work in different hospitals.
There was one quote I did want to read from one of the respondents, and I'll just read it to you guys. So it's most of the obstacles occur up front for those like me who are from the Philippines and who train there. Matching is very difficult. Once you're in, dealing with visa, immigration issues are the manageable issues to deal with. And then the other one, from a more domestic perspective, was it is really difficult to find Filipino-American mentors because there are just not enough of them, at least where I am. I think it is also because we do not necessarily have a robust infrastructure through which we can all connect with one another in terms of identity. It's difficult to place myself within a cultural context, specifically Asian, Hispanic, Pacific Islander, URM, not URM, underrepresented minority, which can make navigating certain spaces in academia a bit more challenging. So this is a very similar question, but not as a structured free response. But basically, what are some specific barriers that you feel Filipino-American physicians face in obtaining leadership positions in the United States healthcare system? And again, just ranked from the most cited reason to the least cited reason was the first one, which I think is similar to the free responses, is lack of examples of Filipino-American physician leaders in the workplace, followed close by lack of visibility in the workplace. And then the last three were lack of leadership training, cultural disconnect with employers, and difficult work environments like high stress and work-family balance.
And I want to point out over here, can you go back to that real quick? So the lack of examples of Filipino-American physician leaders in the workplace is a very high proportion of the actual respondents' concern. That, as well as this lack of visibility in the workplace. Has anyone heard of kind of the model minority? You want to kind of like shout out what you've heard about being a model minority as an Asian physician?
I mean, I think me personally, although I come from a very diverse academic department from India, African, and so I'm actually not experiencing that as much personally, but yeah, I definitely see that in other departments in terms of more Caucasian, white, male especially, and women are considered a minority too. So.
Yeah, exactly.
But they are seen as a role model.
Dr.
So I think there is the misting of the model minority, because originally Asians were the model minority, but now they're finding that there's a big group of Asian Americans in the United States. There's also Burmese and others that are not really counted as the model minority. So really, we're not really a model minority in general. Yeah.
But the go ahead.
This is a very complex question, you know. It has to be divided. I think the foundation of your study, it needs to be investigated. Because you have to be very particular, okay, about us, the foreign medical graduates. There are two types, okay? The real foreign medical graduates and the Americans that goes to foreign schools. Okay, there's a big difference. We as a group here, the majority, 80%, who are here, came to the United States because of an opportunity coming from the Fulbright, from the very beginning, the Fulbright after World War II, okay, the training is in America, not in Europe anymore. Okay, so the Nationality Act of 1965, okay, when we have to take the exam in the Philippines after graduation, okay, we take the board exam, and also the following month, we take the ECFMG exam to come to the United States. we were first draft choices because of the Vietnam War and all the wars over there. Okay, 12,000 of the graduates, okay, are in the military, so they need us to fill the gap. We are very much needed. First draft choice, we are special group, but we are supposed to go home after our training. Okay, what happened? Opportunities was here, got married, and so on and so forth. We got children. Okay, 50% or less was able to go home. Of the 50% that went home after 2, 3, or 5 years, they came back to the U.S. Yeah. So, you know, the dear Philippines that we are supposed to help, okay, nawala na yun. You know, kasi we have our own families already. Okay. Then they tighten up immigration here. Okay, we call the visa qualifying exam. You cannot come here for training unless you pass the VQE, which is the national board here in the United States. That was 1976. That was the cutoff. Okay, UP has to sign, okay, that they are traitors if they come here for training in the US. So they come for 6 months, whatever, you know, Juan Flavier, Johnny Flavier, came here to Baltimore, okay, for 3 years, stayed, and when he finished his training, he went back. He became the Secretary of Health, okay, during President Ramos' time. So, and our children here in the U.S., they are Americans. They are not Filipinos anymore. No,
Well, I still identify as Filipino and American.
Yeah,
That's
it's quite a few, maybe about 12% of our children, okay, goes to medical school. 12 to 15%.
Yeah.
That's the statistics.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for that historical perspective. I think it's really helpful to understand the migration waves that happened in the 1970s. And I think I can only speak from my own personal experience. These are the 20 to 30-year-old current physicians who identify as Filipino American, and we'll get to this in a little bit. But we were just talking about this on the train ride over, actually, Antonio and I. What does it mean to be Filipino American? What does it mean to be a Filipino in America? What does it mean to be an American of Filipino descent? What does it mean to be Pinoy? What does it mean to be Pinay? What does it mean to be Filipinx?
Yeah.
I think these are all like larger questions that actually don't come up in our qualitative results, and we really hope to kind of parse that out a lot more. But to actually kind of add to that narrative that you so eloquently provided is, so what happens after the 1970s? You start to have the immigration wave in the 1980s, which is actually predominantly other professional classes, such as engineers, nurses, and other doctors, but I venture to say that especially after the Vietnam War, they had to expand to more professional classes. So that is kind of that's the group that my parents belong to. So they themselves are not physicians. And I would argue that this group of our respondents kind of represent the children of that generation. So unfortunately, we chose not to include the 30 and 40-year-olds who would probably be the children that you were talking about. And we are able to parse that a little bit more, and I think like the next step of our analysis will be taking into account your question. Of those who were abroad trained, how many of them were actually born in the Philippines, and how many of them were actually born here and went back to the Philippines?
It's a really great point, and thank you for making that, because I actually spent a year in the Philippines. I did a Fulbright, actually. I did a year in the Philippines, and American to Philippines. And so many of the people I met at UST, PGH, and St. Luke's were actually Americans like me who went to the Philippines for medical school and then went back. So that's a very good point. I like that. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, May and October this month, okay, are Asian months.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Filipino months.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a
And
good
if you remember the housewife slur.
Yeah, of course.
Okay,
of course.
and San Francisco, Dr. Daniel, San Francisco, New York here, we have to have that protest.
Yeah.
DC and so on and so forth. So
Yeah, I remember that. And I'm very happy to hear that. I think that Filipino is such a big term, but our mission is to bring us together, not apart, even though we're so diverse. So we'll continue with the data over here. Oh, you did that one? Okay, perfect. So this one is, if you've been involved in any Filipino-American organization, that could be NAFA, PhilPro, any of the Filipino organizations here in the United States, what is it that you actually did in those organizations? This is not a question about what you wanted to do, but what did you actually do in those organizations? Social events and networking were the most common events that they did. Mentorship programs, and then community service events, academic advancement, leadership training, and medical missions to the Philippines were the least. And you can see, majority of the Filipino-American organizations here were about social events, which you can see at the big blue bar on the left. This one is about the ethnic physician organization. So, for example, a lot of us don't have a Filipino local physician organization in where we live. Let's say we're in Arkansas. It's very difficult to find other Filipino physicians. So if you've been involved in any other ethnic physician organizations, Filipino included, but that can include a Chinese physician organization, Latino, African American, what is it that you did most? Again, social events and networking were the most common, followed by mentorship programs, academic advancement and leadership training, and then last was community service events and medical missions. So it seems like medical missions are something that are uncommonly done among the respondents to this survey.
Antonio, can you move two slides back?
Two slides back.
The other one, next. Mentorship programs for medical students and or pre-med students.
Yeah.
That's interesting to find that in a Filipino-American organization, not a medical organization.
Yeah. It is also interesting. I know that, for example, the Filipino Lawyers Association, there's a NAFALA, I think that's called. I know that they have mentorship programs. There's so many different Filipino professional organizations outside of medicine that actually do have like a big brother, big sister, like big ate, big kuya kind of program. So I think that that's something that the respondents have experienced and are more familiar with. But thank you. So this is,
And so this was kind of our kind of the big, rich, qualitative question that we had asked, and I think we'll kind of speak to a lot of the issues that have been raised in terms of like Filipino identity, like who are respondents, and maybe this will give the group a better understanding of exactly who actually answered our survey. And so what Antonio and I thought would be helpful is actually just to read, I mean, we present a lot of the answers here, we're not going to read all of them. I'm happy to talk about them during questions or after the session. But basically, what are your thoughts on being a Filipino doctor in the United States? We were very intentional about the term Filipino doctor. So, for example, youth should have a role in shaping leadership, or else there is no sustainability.
And I think these are kind of the key slides to really find out what these respondents are thinking. This is not from me and Iko, this is from actual respondents. So the second one. In Los Angeles, a large proportion of Filipinx, that means like kind of Filipino-Filipina, self-identified as non-Asian, Pacific Islander or Latinx, due to their experience. Due to this, I think it's important that a national organization of Filipinx physicians takes a strong stance against racism in order to create a welcoming environment for all of its members.
It can be incredibly rewarding position to be a Filipino-American physician and to treat other Filipinos and to be a leader in the hospital. Also though, for being a Filipino-American, I can also sometimes feel not, quote unquote, Filipino enough, end quote, because I do not speak the language.
And maybe some of our respondents had, parents who are from the Ilocos or from Visayas, or maybe they're not fluent in Tagalog. As a young Filipino-American who's interested in medicine, I feel that not as many Filipino pre-meds have physician mentors or role models. I'm glad to have met my mentor at an early stage of college, and that opportunities have increased in Filipino pre-health organizations at UCLA. However, my peers in other universities who are people of color do not have these opportunities.
And to contrast that with an East Coast perspective, being on the East Coast and in a specialized field, I don't see a ton of physicians with Filipino ancestry. It's hard to make broad generalizations about such an extreme minority. However, I do see some benefit in connecting as many of us as possible. If nothing else, as a reminder that others exist that have similar upbringing and backgrounds. I hope this initiative is a successful one.
All right. This is from a Filipino who trained abroad. So there are instances wherein it's actually harder to network with the MDs from back home in the Philippines for one reason or another. Some senior doctors back home, that's the Philippines, feel that those who train in the US are not considered part of the local scene group anymore. So it's almost like what you're talking about, the whole trader. I had friends actually who trained in PGH and they stayed in the US and they didn't come back to the Philippines and they said, oh, I'm a trader, and they laugh about it, but that's how they actually felt.
Stigma concerning access to mental health care is a huge undermet need among Filipino populations that physicians can play a role in addressing. And I'm pretty sure the psychiatrists who are on your board did not answer this survey. That was not a point.
And the next one's a bit longer one, so I'll just go to the last one. Lastly, regarding my rankings for career priorities, I believe that leadership training and coaching is most important. I feel that once we have stronger influence/visibility in leadership, whether it's in healthcare in general, resources for mentorship, conferences, research, and academic training will greatly improve, like a chain reaction.
So we just threw a lot at you, and so we're just going to summarize very quickly some of our key findings. But basically, this is a sample of 20 to 30-year-olds with diverse training, diverse backgrounds, and diverse experiences. And there are some differences we think between kind of where those different perspectives come from. Even though we're a fairly small community, there's a lot of kind of perspectives to have to keep in mind here, specifically around values and priorities.
And so I already kind of went over the differences between those who trained in the US versus trained in the Philippines, but we can go over them. So the common themes for barriers for Filipino American physicians: racism, family duties, lack of Filipino physician leadership examples, lack of workplace visibility, and immigration issues. And this is the common thing. It's bolded in orange for a reason, so you can all see it. There's a very strong desire to have a national Filipino physician organization that involves the youth, especially with regard to priorities on career advancement, leadership training, and community engagement.
So some of the next steps that we kind of had in mind and some questions we would like to pose to the group is how can APPA leadership use these results to address the concerns and priorities of young Phil-Am physicians and engage them? And how can APPA appeal to these young physicians, and what kind of resources and programs can we create to engage the next generation of its members, its next generation of members? And how do we communicate a wider encompassing definition of Filipino physicians in America? I think kind of to your question.
So
perhaps APPA should be explicit in including Filipino Americans who identify as American physicians.
So we added that also because a lot of the younger Filipino American respondents saw the survey, and I told them, if I talk to them in person, APPA is the organization that we are working with and trying to partner with. And so what does APPA stand for? They said Association of Philippine Physicians in America. Is that correct?
Yeah.
But they said, I'm not a Philippine physician. I'm a Filipino-American physician. I said, no, please take the survey. Regardless, we'll talk about that later. But that's really the concern that a lot of the younger Filipino-American doctors have. So what concrete next steps will we take to strengthen APPA together? We have lots of steps.
We could add another key.
Exactly. So that is our presentation. Thank you very much for having us. And our email addresses are up here if you have any questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Just real quick, I think I want to mention, I really appreciate your comment earlier in the historical background, because a lot of the younger Filipinos don't know. I personally know because my mother, but I think one of the barriers now we're facing is that there are more U.S. medical schools opening up, but no increase in resident positions. So it's making it harder for IMGs to get positions, in addition to the visa problem. So I think the more our organizations, all Filipino organizations in this country, need to really maybe step up and help these guys, for those who are already in the Philippines, Filipino American students in the pipeline, to get more involved in this and support each other. I want to ask a question too before the audience. Do you have an explanation why one of your statistics was that they considered having socializations and conferences be the least interest in this age group? Because every year we have an annual gathering, all of the organizations, so parties, galas, dress up, and things like that. I mean, I might have my own explanation, personal experiences, but do you have an explanation? Social functions, social gatherings.
So if I can put my mixed methods hat on for this one, I think when you look at both the quantitative and the qualitative data, there's a kind of interesting trend. So first of all, those who trained abroad tended to be in actually more Midwestern states. So that big spike in Illinois that you saw of current state was actually mostly were actually trained abroad for medical school, which I thought was interesting. And then so when you also look at the qualitative kind of descriptions, a lot of people said that like, oh, I don't see a lot of other Filipinos, and so it's really hard to socialize with other people with similar experiences I do. And those tended to be actually from people from kind of Midwestern states. When you look at the people from California, New York, basically, most of them went to med school there, or are in med school there. And a lot of them reported that they actually engage in all of those social activities in other organizations. So they're getting it somewhere else, or they're just around a lot of other Filipinos and don't feel the need to. So I do think there's a population of people, of Filipino physicians, who feel kind of isolated. And I think those are tend to be more of the abroad, and maybe they don't come here with the same kind of social networks that someone who grew up here would. And I think there's kind of I don't think there's social is not as important, it's more important to a certain subset of people.
Yeah, 'cause I've been the president of our New Jersey Psychiatric Association and one of the younger ones with Dr. Aragasa, but it's been hard to recruit even my colleagues in this area who are younger than me. And I think maybe, I don't know whether it's family or the kids, or they have younger kids now versus my kids are older, that I could leave them for a couple of days or a night. So I think that might be a barrier as well. So let's open up to the audience. Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
First of all, I would like to congratulate you for coming over here. This is a very important project for guys like you. We have started, trying to contact some young Filipino who see us before, but we were not successful at all. And I really appreciate what Dr. Romel Rivera, done by inviting you guys. And I'm in my place. I practice in Northern California, very close to your place. Okay. What we're doing in Northern California is this. As a member of the Philippine Medical Society of Northern California, we have encouraged and invited students, premium students, from UC Berkeley, Stanford University, and UC Davis. And they're very enthusiastic in doing this. In fact, we invited them to go to medical missions in the Philippines. I'm not bragging, but so far, in all the entire medical missions in the Philippines, we have the greatest number of participants. Annually, we have about 150 to 180 people going over there. 50% physicians, 50%, 25% nurses, and the rest are support groups. We have also invited students, in workshop, inviting them to participate in our workshop in San Francisco and in the place where I practice in Modesto, California. And me being member, belong to the Board of Trustees of the Stanislaus Medical Society, we have workshop too, inviting medical students and students in the high school to generate interest in the medical profession. Doing this, actually, to me, because I'm the only one who's very interested in trying to encourage these people, especially the Filipino community in my group, it's not enough. You have started a very nice and very, important business that you're doing, encouraging Filipino students. By doing this, you're not only helping the medical community, you're also trying to build, a strong foundation for the APPA. We have tried this in the past about trying to encourage students. we were not successful at all. Now that you are trying to at least make sure spearhead this program, do it. It is very, very crucial.
Yeah.
My other comment is this. Your home tax in medical schools are only limited to certain portions. Try also to get people or graduates from other states.
Yeah, I totally agree.
See, my son practiced in Texas. There are lots of Filipino physicians in Texas. So please do that.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for bringing yourselves over here. Try to sincerely them important things to be done. So that APPA will progress. Because APPA is the only organization that is really what we call recognized by the AMA. Thank you again.
No, that's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I was actually one of those pre-meds. I trained at UCSF. So I was Philippine Medical Society of Northern California. They actually helped me also with different scholarships and everything. So I was very happy when I found out that there was something in San Francisco. And we also had the Mabuhay Health Center in San Francisco itself. So I think that that's amazing. You're so right that this is not all of the 50 states. Yet there's Filipino physicians all there. We need your help also. Is New Jersey on there?
No.
Yeah, New Jersey's not on there. We sent out the survey to as many people as we could, but we definitely need, it's a community effort in order to outreach to everyone.
Yeah, thank you. You had a good comment on that. I'm from New York.
Yeah.
I have been a president in PMA in New York, and my wife is president. We have problems with our members here. Most of our members are old people practicing, but they're dying. And now we have only few members, but we cannot recruit new members. Especially young people who are children, grandchildren, who are doctors. It's hard to get them to join with us. Said, oh, that's only for old people, not for young people. But anyway, I'm in the Lions Club, and we have a career program for youth, but it's not only directed to the youth of Filipino, but all in Brooklyn and Queens. So what we do, we had this career program. We invited students, and we invite all these professionals, different professions. It's not only doctors and nurses, different positions. And this student will say, oh, I want to be like you, help me like you. So that's another project that we're doing. But I don't know, our problem is our membership in the Philippine Medical Association. That's our problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
I really want to actually first of all acknowledge like all the amazing efforts that trying to say this in the nicest way possible. Previous generations have done both at national and regional levels. And I think a lot of the respondents actually really do speak to like they really benefited from the regional mentorship that they had. They were basically, a lot of them said they were just super lucky to find kind of those kind of regional efforts, like local efforts I should say, in becoming a physician. And I think a lot of them are now kind of at this kind of critical age where it's like, great, I finally got here. What am I supposed to do? And I think some of the tone that I'm also hearing from some of the respondents, and also just from our networking, is just like, great, we have this, we've benefited from local mentorship and local efforts, like, but what is like, is there a national identity out there that really appeals like to a very broad group of people that we can start to make political and policy type of arguments?
And I want to put the question clearly out there so I can tell the young physicians who are Filipino. Is APPA considered the national Filipino physician network here in America? Is there only one?
Yes.
It's supposed to, okay.
Yes, APPA is recognized by the AMA, okay, the PMA, okay, as the official, okay, representation
That's good.
of a national.
Perfect.
Yeah. But we also have specialty. Okay, we have the surgical, we have the psychiatric, etc., etc. So, but APPA is the national.
Okay, good to
We
know.
have a question over here.
Yeah, I admire you, really. You're doing an excellent job. And I think this is the start of a new generation. And I think you should be involved in it. And I think, personally, I think you should be invited to our meeting to see how the organization function. I think that most of us here are, as my classmates said, we're dying. You know, we're becoming
Chris,
Come on, everybody good, all right? But the number one problem that I've heard with regards to the APPA is the infighting, the crab mentality, and also the prima donna attitude. And I think we should take that out. Agree? And you know, it's really a shame that we are supposed to be the national network or organization for all the Philippine physicians here. But you know, we're being isolated. You know, we're isolating ourselves. I don't think we should have New York, New Jersey, all that. I think it should be just one association for the entire U.S. And I think that's the way that we can really change the picture here in APPA. And I think one of the things that we should change is now with regards to the name of the APPA. I think it should be Association of Philippine American Physicians in America, and not just yes.
Papa, yes, thank you. I want to do a personal plug to that too with Dr. Ragasa. I've known Dr. Ragasa through NJPA, and the reason why I have had reserves for APA. But that said, I think going to the Board of Trustees or of APA definitely need to consider those and maybe make the regions or states as chapters of the APA. Yes.
Thank you very much again for an excellent presentation. I thought that was very well done. I just asked to put that slide up as far as what those folks that you polled, what they're looking for. And I'm just looking at that, and I think that's in order, right?
Yeah, from most to least, yeah.
Of interest, the priority.
Exactly.
But if you look at that, there was, if you took out the Filipino, I mean, isn't there something that's just could be for any other organization can provide those same
I see.
interests? I guess the thing I'm just wondering is that, like what you're saying, some of the people were just wondering about the APPA as far as, is it really suit their needs? Or you said you were already involved in a local organization.
There's, kind of, it's more like community health rather than a physician organization. Yeah, it's there's a historic Filipino town in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
It's a coalition of healers. It's nurses, traditional healers, physicians, etc. So it's not actual Filipino physicians, which is what I've been seeking for in LA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I'm just saying is I think that's what also Dr. Ragasa and Dr. Cueto was saying is, you know, this is, I'm sorry, Dr. Fanganil, that this is originally, he gave a historical context of where the APPA came from. And I think right now we're in this process of evolution. Because it's not just trying to get a heartbeat, a warm body to join the organization. It has to be a win-win situation for both new members and the old members. The old members, their primary goal is this is just for the camaraderie, a social event, and also to provide mission to the Philippines.
Yeah.
And I think as far as for the new blood that we're trying to attract, you know, the old saying of what's in it for me.
Yeah.
And you laid it out fantastic here. What is it that, and I think we could provide that, but we're going to have to, it's going to be a process. But that was my question, I guess, is what the priorities were for attracting new blood.
Yeah, so I think that angst you're kind of expressing, right? I think parallels a lot of other kind of immigrant diasporas in America, in which like migration patterns have changed over time, basically. And that's basically based on U.S. immigration policy, for better or for worse. That's just the way, that's the way Filipinos come to America, basically, and that's obviously changed like over the decades. And I'd say that because this is more like based on kind of my reading of other ethnic groups, basically. How things changed for the Chinese, the Vietnamese, what's some of the other groups that we were like researching? The Koreans and the Indians. And they also have kind of gone through a little, soul searching a little bit as their population changes. And I think that's kind of why we wanted to do this, is to kind of see what the pulse is for our community, because there isn't the same kind of literature out there like about Filipinos as there are about other groups. So that's kind of why we want to do this. But to answer that question a little bit more, I do think there's a difference in migration patterns is at play here, because when you do break it down by people who came here at different points in their lives, they have different priorities. And I wonder if some of that, if there is a physician in this group who might match your personal story, your personal example, I wonder if they have similar priorities and values actually. And it just, we just pose that like, oh, this is like a pretty diverse group of people, and if membership is an issue, how do you appeal to like a very diverse set of experiences?
Can I just interject with that one too? There's a book, and I really recommend it for everyone. It's called Mind the Gap: Generational Differences in Medical Education by Jeffrey Talman. And to your point that, what is in it for me, that's what generation does that usually belong to, right? Maybe. There's something that your generation, I feel like I'm in the middle of these two gaps right here. There's something that you could learn from them. There's something your generation can learn from them. So I think that's really where we have to bridge that gap. And this is excellent. Yes.
Hi, my name is Jennifer. I'm past your demographic. I'm over the 40 group, but I want to soundboard off Dr. Apollonio, Dr. Kaganda, and Dr. Fanganil. My perspective, so I was born here in the States. My parents emigrated in the 60s. I went to medical school and I practiced in Tampa as an ophthalmologist. So I was actually fortunate to grow up in the APPA community in grade school. I attended all of these functions with my parents, and they were very diehard supporters of this organization, even until now. Parents are in their 70s, 80s, but like Ferdinand said, they come here for camaraderie. So why do I still come? Well, I like to come because I want to still maintain core to my heritage. But I am of a biracial marriage, so that's as far as my barriers is, I have to also support my husband's side, my side. I'm early in my career, young children. So what is it in store for me to continue to be the APPA? So I just want to commend you for your initiative. I'd like to, collaborate with you and see what we can do to, promote membership and maybe work with component state societies to involve the young youth, even in high school, pre-med, just to be leaders and mentors for them.
Definitely. Thank you so much for that story. I think it's a common story amongst young Filipino doctors. For me, it was Filipino Americans in medicine at UCLA. The whole medical school class, there were 6 Filipino Americans, and my eyes widened up because I said, oh my gosh, there's young Filipino medical students at UCLA who look like me. So I can become like them maybe one day. And then I found out that there's people before me who had the same kind of sentiment. So I think if we work together and help each other out, definitely balancing the priorities of different generations, this organization could really grow, especially in terms of the younger physician community.
I think a lot of you are near universities. I'm going to be going to UPenn, and they have a Philippine organizations. I think we can really infiltrate those organizations within universities as a pipeline, whether they're going to medical school or not, too. But I think as a mentor to keep that heritage is really important.
So I think the consensus of the group, I think, is to
to move forward with APPA and incorporating these findings to APPA and attract the younger generation. How about, so we now have a website, and to answer the question about why is it Association of Philippine Physicians in America, we are going to put a subheading that would say National Organization of Filipino American Physicians. I think that would capture the Filipino American physicians that are born and raised here and educated here, and incorporate them into the organization. And then we can talk about that in our meeting. And also ask them to be our members, to be part of the organization, so that we could get their ideas and new ideas for the organization.
Okay, a couple more, because we do have to take a break and we have the second half.
Hello. Well, I'm from Ohio, and we have they call Association of Philippine American Physicians in Ohio. So that will capture, what we are talking about. And I'm proud, very proud, that we have young physicians that have been presidents of our association. One of them is Dr. Ferdinand Apolonio. And our other Dr. Jessica Strasberg is our current president. And who's the other one that we had? Yeah, basically those are it. So we're attracting some young physicians that have been board members and secretary of our organizations and young graduates.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so again, thank you so much. We present to you with this certificate of appreciation for your excellent research and our future. Thank you so much. Yeah, you come. Take your. So we'll have a 15-minute break, and please come back right away. I'll be yelling out there to come back because